Ladies and gentlemen, today I want to talk to you about the very first habit of highly effective people. The cornerstone, the foundation. The one that determines how far you'll go, how deep you'll grow, and how much you'll ultimately contribute to this world. That habit is being proactive. Being proactive means taking responsibility for your life. It means recognizing that you are responsible, that no matter what happens to you, you still hold the power to choose your response. Between stimulus and response, there is a space, and in that space lies your freedom, your growth, and your destiny. How many times have you heard someone say, "I can't do that because of my past," or "I'm stuck because of what happened to me"? Maybe you've said those words yourself. Maybe they've become part of the quiet soundtrack playing in your mind. But I want to challenge you right now with a truth that can shake you awake and set your life on a completely new course. You are not a product of your circumstances. You are a product of your decisions. That may sound bold, but it's not just motivational fluff. It's the raw truth of human growth. You see, we live in a world that often teaches us to blame, to point fingers, to look outward when life goes wrong. It's easier, it's safer. It protects the ego. It's my parents' fault. It's the economy. It's the government. It's my ex. But I want you to hear this deeply. The moment you give away blame, you give away power. And the moment you stop blaming, you begin reclaiming. Let me tell you about Viktor Frankl, a man who lived through one of the darkest human atrocities, Nazi concentration camps. He lost everything, his family, his freedom, his health. Yet in that bleak, hopeless place, he discovered a truth that the Nazis could never take from him. He wrote, "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances." Do you feel the weight of that? That kind of mindset isn't born from comfort. It's forged in fire. In the space between what happens to us and how we respond, there is freedom. That is what it means to be proactive. That is what it means to live, not by chance, but by choice. You and I have that same power, but most people never tap into it. Why? Because it requires a shift so radical that it feels like a personal revolution. It means we can no longer say, "They made me angry." No, they did something, but you chose anger. It means we can't say, "I had no choice." No, you always have a choice. Maybe not in the event, but always in the response. There was a young man I once mentored who had grown up in an environment of violence and poverty. Drugs on the corner, sirens at night. He could have easily said, "This is just who I am. I'm a product of my neighborhood." But he didn't. He decided, intentionally, that his story wasn't going to end there. Every morning, he woke up early to read books. He volunteered at a local center to build leadership skills. He surrounded himself with people who saw more in him than he saw in himself. Today, he runs a nonprofit helping youth escape the same traps he avoided. Was it luck? No. Was it easy? Definitely not. It was a decision, repeated every single day. And that's the truth about being proactive. It's not a one-time event. It's a discipline, a way of seeing, a habit. It's recognizing moment by moment that your life is not determined by what happens to you, but by what happens through you. Your power lies in that space between the event and your choice. Some people shrink in that space. Others grow. Some react with blame. Others respond with leadership. You choose who you'll be. So ask yourself, where in your life are you acting like a product of your circumstances? Is it in your job, your health, your relationships, your finances? Be honest. Radical honesty is the beginning of transformation. And then take that awareness and shift it. Not tomorrow. Not someday. Right now, choose to act. Choose to own. Choose to lead. And watch what happens when you stop waiting for change and start being the change. Because the truth is, your circumstances may have shaped you, but they do not define you. Only your decisions can do that. And today, you can decide to be something more. Not because someone else believes in you. Not because the stars align. But because you finally realized the truth, the power was yours all along. Language is not just a tool we use to describe our world. It's the very framework through which we create it. The words you speak, whether out loud or silently to yourself, are more than just sounds or thoughts. They shape your reality. They reinforce beliefs. They create patterns. And most importantly, they either empower you or disempower you. Reactive people don't even realize they're doing it. They use language that gives away control, language that chains them to powerlessness, without ever recognizing the impact. Listen carefully to yourself today. Do you say things like, "I can't do this"? Or, "They made me feel that way"? Maybe you say, "That's just the way I am." These phrases seem harmless on the surface, but they are signs of a reactive mindset. They reveal a belief that life is happening to you, that you are simply a passenger being carried along by the waves of circumstance. But here's the truth. Every time you say, "I can't," what you really mean is, "I won't." Every time you say, "I have to," you're ignoring the fact that you're making a choice. Let me give you an example. A man I once worked with came to me deeply frustrated with his career. He kept saying, "I have to stay at this job. I can't just quit. I have bills, a mortgage, a family." He believed he was trapped. But when we peeled it back, what he was really saying was, "I choose to stay at this job to provide financial stability for my family." That's a completely different mindset. The facts didn't change. He was still in the same job, with the same obligations. But the language shifted the ownership. Instead of feeling stuck, he began to feel empowered. He wasn't trapped. He was choosing. And from that place of ownership, he started to look for ways to improve his situation. Things he'd never considered before, because he had been too busy telling himself a disempowering story. This is the hidden power of proactive language. It changes how you see the world, how you feel about yourself, and how others respond to you. Imagine you're in a difficult relationship and you keep saying, "She drives me crazy," or "He never listens to me." That's reactive. It places all the power in someone else's hands. But what if you said, "I choose how I respond to her," or "I'm working on improving the way I communicate with him"? That small shift recenters you in your own power. It stops the blame and opens the door to change. There was a woman I met at a leadership workshop. She had struggled for years with health issues, always saying, "I can't get in shape. I have bad genes. I've tried everything." But those words were walls. Until one day, she stopped saying, "I can't," and started saying, "I haven't figured it out yet, but I'm learning." That single change lit a fire in her. She started experimenting with different workouts, with new recipes, with better routines. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Her language changed her mindset, and her mindset changed her actions. That's the chain reaction that proactivity sets in motion. You might think this is just semantics. It's not. It's the architecture of change. Your words are not random. They're a reflection of your inner world. And when you start changing those words, you start changing your identity. You move from being someone life happens to into someone who shapes their life, someone who leads it. This is why it's so important to listen to yourself. Be your own observer. Catch the reactive language in real time. Write it down if you have to. Every time you say, "I can't," ask yourself, what am I really saying here? Am I unwilling or am I afraid? Every time you say, "I have to," ask, what choice am I making here that I'm not acknowledging? That self-awareness is where growth begins. So right now, I challenge you to do something that may feel awkward at first. Start replacing reactive language with proactive ownership. Say, "I choose." Say, "I will." Say, "I'm working on it," even if the circumstances are hard, especially when they are. Because language, like a chisel in the hand of a sculptor, shapes your reality. Use it with intention. Speak from responsibility. Speak from choice. You are the author of your story. Don't let your vocabulary be written by fear or blame or resignation. Choose your words. Because when you change your language, you don't just change your sentences. You change your life. Every day, We're presented with things that worry us, frustrate us, or distract us. The news bombards us with chaos. Social media fills our minds with comparison, and people around us constantly pull us into problems we cannot solve. Most people live in a state of reaction, consumed by things completely outside of their control. They spend their energy, their mental strength, and their time spinning their wheels in the circle of concern. But proactive people operate differently. They focus on their circle of influence. The circle of concern is filled with all the things that bother us, but are beyond our control: the weather, the economy, the decisions of others, the opinions of strangers, the past, even the future. It's large and it's seductive. You can talk about it endlessly, complain about it, argue about it. But here's the harsh truth: nothing grows in that circle. You can water it with your energy all day long, but it will never produce fruit. It drains you and gives nothing back. Now contrast that with your circle of influence, the smaller, more powerful space where your choices, behaviors, and attitudes live. This is where your power is. This is where growth happens. When you focus on what you can do, what you can improve, what you can initiate, you begin to expand your capacity. You stop being a victim of the world and start becoming a creator within it. Let me tell you a story. There was a young manager named Jason, leading a team in a company going through major changes. Morale was low, people were quitting, the leadership above him wasn't communicating well. Every meeting was filled with complaints about what the higher-ups weren't doing. Jason started to feel overwhelmed. But one day, he decided to draw a literal circle on a whiteboard. Two, actually. The big one labeled concern, and the smaller one inside labeled influence. And then he asked his team, what do we control? Slowly, people started to contribute. We control how we support each other. We control how we communicate with our clients. We control the energy we bring. In that moment, something shifted. They stopped whining and started owning. Within 6 months, that team became one of the highest performing groups in the company. Not because the company changed, but because they did. You see, proactive people shrink their circle of concern by expanding their circle of influence. And how do they expand it? By consistently taking responsibility for what's theirs. Your attitude, your tone, your preparation, your habits, your follow-through, your energy. That's your circle. And when you consistently improve what's within your reach begins to grow. Now think about your own life. How much time do you spend complaining about things you can't control? Be honest. Is it your partner's behavior? Your company's policies? The government? What if you took that same energy and directed it toward what you can influence? Imagine how different your day would feel if, instead of fixating on how bad traffic is, you use that time to listen to an inspiring podcast or call someone you care about. Imagine if, instead of worrying about what your coworker is or isn't doing, you invested that energy into improving your own systems, your own relationships, your own skill set. Here's what's powerful. When you take care of your circle, people notice. When you stop complaining and start acting, your influence expands, not just in theory, but in reality. People begin to trust you more. You start to gain opportunities you couldn't see before. Doors open because you stopped waiting and started walking. Focusing on your circle of influence isn't just about being positive. It's about being powerful. It's about reclaiming control over the only thing you ever truly had power over: yourself. It's not about ignoring real problems, but about choosing where to invest your effort. The reactive person spreads themselves thin, trying to control what can't be controlled. The proactive person focuses deeply, steadily, and consistently on what they can do. And that, over time, changes everything. So here's your challenge: draw your two circles. In one, write down everything that's stressing you out but that you can't control. In the other, write down everything you can act on. Then do something. One small step. One call. One decision. One boundary. Just start. Because as soon as you start focusing on your influence, your life begins to shift. You go from feeling powerless to purposeful. You stop being carried by the current and start steering your own ship. And that, my friend, is where your freedom begins. Some people walk into a room and you can feel the energy shift, not because of anything they say or do, but because of who they are. It's like they bring the sun with them. They radiate stability, calm, and clarity, even when everything around them is chaotic. Then there are others who seem to carry storms. You can feel the tension, the complaint, the negativity clinging to them. The difference is not luck, talent, or genetics. The difference is that some people have learned to carry their own weather. You don't need ideal circumstances to be happy. You don't need everyone around you to act right in order for you to stay calm. You don't need the day to be perfect to feel peace. That's what reactive people believe, that they are only as good as their surroundings. If someone cuts them off in traffic, their whole day is ruined. If their boss snaps at them, they carry that emotion for hours. If a loved one forgets to say thank you, they spiral into resentment. Their inner world is at the mercy of the external world. They're like leaves in the wind, tossed and turned by every passing storm. But proactive people don't wait for the weather to be perfect. They create their own internal weather. They decide, no matter what's happening around me, I'm going to choose how I show up. That's not ignoring problems. That's not pretending everything is fine. It's strength. It's maturity. It's leadership. It's the ability to anchor yourself in values rather than circumstances. There's a story I'll never forget. A school teacher named Mrs. Daniels taught in one of the most underfunded schools in her district. The building was falling apart, resources were scarce, and many of the students came from difficult home situations. Yet every single day, she walked into her classroom with joy. She greeted each child by name, smiled from her heart, and created a space where learning could happen. When asked how she stayed so positive, she said, "I can't control what these kids go through outside my classroom. But in here, I decide the weather. I decide whether it's a storm or sunshine. And I choose sunshine." That's the essence of carrying your own weather. You take back the power you've been unknowingly giving to everything outside of you. You stop saying, "They ruined my mood," and you start saying, "I'm choosing to protect my peace." You stop saying, "This day is awful," and instead say, "I'm going to bring something good to this day." It's not about faking happiness or denying pain. It's about choosing a response that aligns with the person you want to be. Here's what's so powerful. When you begin to carry your own weather, you don't just change your own life. You impact every life around you. Your family feels it. Your coworkers feel it. Strangers feel it. Energy is contagious. When you walk into a room grounded, centered, and positive, not fake, but truly grounded, you give others permission to do the same. This doesn't mean you won't get irritated, frustrated, or hurt. You will. You're human. But the difference is that you learn to pause, to breathe, to choose your emotional climate rather than letting it be dictated for you. You become the thermostat, not the thermometer. A thermometer simply reflects the temperature. A thermostat sets it. Try this. The next time you feel yourself being pulled by the chaos around you, someone cuts you off, someone disrespects you, something doesn't go your way, pause. In that moment, ask yourself, do I want to reflect this chaos, or do I want to rise above it? That pause is everything. In that moment, you reclaim your control. You choose your climate. It might seem small, but the impact is profound. Think about your home. What would change if you decided to bring calm into every room, regardless of what others were doing? Think about your job. What would happen if you brought clarity and kindness to meetings instead of matching the stress around you? Over time, people begin to expect strength from you. And even more importantly, you begin to expect it from yourself. So stop waiting for the outside world to give you peace, happiness, or motivation. It may never come. Start building it inside. Make your mind a space of resilience. Make your heart a space of gratitude. And carry that with you into every room, every conversation, every challenge. Because the most powerful people in the world are not the loudest, the wealthiest, or the flashiest. They are the ones who have learned this simple truth: I am the weather. And today I choose sunshine. Life throws things at us every single day. Some good, some bad, some utterly unexpected. And the truth is, we don't control most of those things. Someone says something hurtful. A client cancels. The market shifts. Your plans fall apart. That's life. But here's where your power lies. Not in what happens, but in how you respond. Reactive people immediately react to what they feel. They let anger, fear, jealousy, or frustration drive their decisions. Proactive people pause. They create space between stimulus and response. And in that space, they choose. Most people don't even realize they're reacting. They think they're responding, but what they're really doing is giving control away. Something bad happens, and they automatically complain, shut down, lash out, withdraw, or blame. They've created a habit of reacting, and it runs them on autopilot. They haven't built the muscle of choice. They haven't learned to step into that space between the trigger and the action. But that space right there is where transformation begins. Imagine this: you're driving. Someone cuts you off aggressively. Your heart jumps, your grip tightens, and your mouth starts to form words you wouldn't say in front of your grandmother. That instant anger, that flash of emotion, it's the stimulus. Now here's the key moment. Do you just let it fly and stew in rage for the rest of the drive? Or do you take a breath, remember your values, and choose a different reaction? Maybe you remind yourself, that driver's recklessness isn't worth me losing my peace today. That choice, that tiny shift, makes all the difference. Not because the situation changed, but because you did. This isn't about suppressing feelings or pretending to be unbothered. It's about owning your power. When you say things like, he made me angry, or that ruined my day, what you're really saying is, I gave that person or situation the keys to my emotional state. But no one deserves that kind of power over you. Not your boss, not your ex, not even the stranger who pushed ahead in line. You get to decide how you show up. I once worked with a woman who was struggling with constant stress at work. Every time her manager criticized her, she'd shut down. She felt defeated, like she wasn't good enough, like she wanted to quit. But when we talked, I asked her, what if the feedback isn't a personal attack? What if it's an opportunity to grow? She started to see that the manager's words weren't the problem. Her automatic interpretation was. Over time, she trained herself to listen with curiosity instead of defensiveness. She didn't always agree, but she chose to respond rather than react. That shift didn't just change her job, it changed her confidence, her mindset, her peace of mind. That's what proactivity gives you. Not control over others, but mastery over yourself. And from that mastery, your life begins to move in a new direction. You start to become the kind of person who leads with clarity instead of confusion, with calm instead of chaos, with purpose instead of panic. It takes practice. Like any muscle, the ability to choose your response grows stronger the more you use it. Start with small moments. When the barista gets your order wrong, don't snap. When your child throws a tantrum, don't mirror it. Breathe. When the email comes in late at night and it's laced with passive aggression, don't fire back. Pause. Ask yourself, who do I want to be right now? What response reflects my values? That pause creates freedom. It separates the event from your identity. It puts the power back where it belongs, in your hands. This isn't just about being polite or mature. It's about living a life that's truly aligned. You don't want to be someone who's easily provoked, constantly emotional, always at the mercy of others. You want to be someone who moves with intention, who doesn't let life happen to them, but who chooses how they engage with life. So the next time you're triggered, I challenge you to stop and claim your power. Don't react, respond. Even if the moment is messy, even if the emotions are loud, take the time to choose the version of yourself that you're proud of, because that's who you really are. Not the reaction, but the response. Not the impulse, but the intention. And when you start choosing your response over and over again, you become someone that life cannot shake. You become rooted, steady, powerful. Not because nothing ever goes wrong, but because you have finally learned the one thing no one ever taught you in school, that you always have a choice. Most people live their lives following a script they didn't write, a script handed to them by their parents, their culture, their peers, their past. It tells them who they are, what they're capable of, what they should believe, how they should behave. And so they wake up each day and act out this script without even questioning it. They go to jobs they hate because that's what responsible people do. They stay in relationships that drain them because that's just the way things are. They keep quiet about their dreams because somewhere along the line they were told that's not realistic. And then they wonder why they feel stuck, why they feel numb, why they feel like life is something they're surviving rather than something they're creating. It's because they're not the author of their own story. They're actors in someone else's play. But here's the truth: you can tear up that script. You can write a new one. You can choose what your life looks like. And that begins the moment you decide to live by design instead of by default. That is the power of being proactive. That is the moment you stop letting life happen to you and start happening to life. I once met a man who was stuck in a corporate job for over 20 years. Every time you asked him how work was, he'd give the same answer. It pays the bills. He'd convinced himself that was enough. But deep down, he was miserable. He'd always dreamed of working with young people, mentoring them, helping them grow. But that wasn't practical. That wasn't the responsible path. So he buried that dream under meetings and emails and long commutes. Until one day, after a health scare, he realized something. Life isn't waiting for you to find the right time. It's happening now. And so, slowly, he began to write a new script. He started volunteering on weekends with a local youth program. That turned into mentoring. That turned into part-time coaching. Eventually, he left his corporate job to pursue a new path that lit him up inside. The risk was real. But the regret of staying stuck was even greater. This man didn't suddenly become brave. He just stopped living a lie. He stopped believing that the script he had been handed was the only one available. And you can do the same. You are not obligated to continue a story that doesn't honor who you are becoming. But it takes courage. Because writing your own script means letting go of what's familiar. It means facing resistance not just from the world, but from within. Your inner voice might say, "Who do you think you are?" Or, "You've already made your choice." But I want to tell you today, you're allowed to change. You're allowed to grow. You're allowed to evolve. Being proactive means accepting that you are not fixed. You are not a finished product. You are not stuck in a single role. You are a work in progress with the power to create, to edit, to rewrite. The stories you tell yourself matter. If you keep repeating, "I'm not good with money," guess what? You'll keep sabotaging your finances. If you say, "I've always been a procrastinator," you'll continue putting off the life you want. If you say, "I'm just not the kind of person who takes risks," then you never will. These are not truths. They're scripts. And scripts can be rewritten. I challenge you to take out a blank piece of paper today and ask yourself, if I were starting from scratch, what kind of life would I design? What would I believe about myself? What kind of work would I do? How would I treat my body? Who would I surround myself with? What kind of impact would I want to make? Don't filter it. Don't shrink it. Just write it. That's the beginning of authorship. Then ask yourself the harder question: what part of my current life doesn't align with this new script? And be honest. That honesty might sting, but it's the doorway to change. You cannot become who you want to be by staying comfortable with who you used to be. You don't have to flip your life upside down overnight. You don't have to quit your job tomorrow or move across the country. But you do have to take ownership. You have to stop blaming your past, your environment, your upbringing, or your personality. You are not a machine running on default settings. You are a human being with choice, with vision, with power. The most successful, fulfilled people you admire didn't get there by following someone else's blueprint. They questioned the script. They made edits. They took ownership of the pen. And so can you. The life you want will not be handed to you. It will be written. One bold sentence, one honest decision, one proactive act at a time. So pick up the pen and start writing. We often talk about freedom as if it's something that's given to us or something that can be taken away by outside forces. We tie it to circumstances, to governments, to money, to time. But real freedom, lasting internal freedom, is not about what you have or don't have. It's about what you take responsibility for. Most people think freedom means doing whatever you want, whenever you want. But that's not freedom. That's indulgence. And indulgence always comes with consequences. Real freedom is not the absence of responsibility. It's the embrace of it. Proactive people understand that the more responsibility you take, the more free you become. Think about it this way. When you take responsibility for your health, you gain the freedom to move, to feel energized, to live longer, to enjoy your days. When you take responsibility for your finances, you gain the freedom to choose how you live, where you go, what you give. When you take responsibility for your emotions, you gain the freedom to stay calm in chaos, to find peace in conflict, to love without fear. Every time you take ownership, you expand your freedom. Every time you avoid it, you shrink it. But the world is full of messages telling us the opposite. We're told that someone else should fix it. Someone else should change. Someone else is to blame. It's easier, right? Easier to point the finger, to wait for someone to save us, to believe that life is just something that happens to us. But easy doesn't lead to freedom. It leads to dependency. It leads to bitterness. It leads to helplessness. I remember talking to a man who had spent years in and out of jobs, constantly frustrated with his bosses, always saying things like, "They don't see my worth," or "They're just out to get me." He kept waiting for someone to recognize his potential. But he never stopped to ask, what am I bringing to the table? What energy am I showing up with? What habits am I reinforcing? He thought he was waiting for an opportunity, but in truth, he was avoiding responsibility. When he finally faced that hard truth, something shifted. He started showing up early, started reading more, started asking for feedback and actually applying it. Within a year, he wasn't just promoted. He was leading the very team he used to complain about, because once he embraced responsibility, he created freedom. Responsibility is the key that unlocks the door to personal power. But most people are afraid of it. Why? Because it means you can't hide anymore. You can't blame your parents forever. You can't keep using your past as a crutch. You can't say, "That's just who I am," and expect change. Responsibility demands that you look in the mirror and say, if something's going to change, it's up to me. That's not easy, but it's necessary, because until you take full ownership of your life, someone or something else will always be in charge. There's a woman I worked with who had every reason to feel powerless. She grew up in poverty, had survived abuse, and had been told her whole life she'd never amount to anything. For a long time, she believed it. But one day, she realized that no one was coming to rewrite her story. That if her life was going to be different, she had to be different. She started waking up earlier, journaling, studying, learning, growing. She didn't wait for permission. She didn't wait for conditions to be perfect. She took responsibility for healing, for learning, for leading. Today, she runs her own business and mentors young women with similar backgrounds. Not because someone rescued her, but because she rescued herself. That is real freedom. Freedom doesn't just happen. It is built brick by brick with responsibility. When you take responsibility for your thoughts, your choices, your actions, and your growth, you are no longer at the mercy of the world. You become the architect of your life. And yes, it's hard, but it's also beautiful, Because suddenly, you realize you don't have to wait anymore. You don't have to wish. You just have to choose. So ask yourself, what area of my life have I been avoiding responsibility for? Where have I been blaming instead of owning? Where have I been passive when I could be powerful? And then don't wait. Start small. Make a decision. Take one step. Speak one truth. Follow through on one commitment. And then another. Because every time you take responsibility, your world gets a little bit bigger, a little more open, a little more free. Freedom is not the result of having everything go your way. It's the result of choosing your way, no matter what life throws at you. And that choice is always yours. Always.